Hi, everyone. I'm Greg McGruder. I'm on the board of the DC Environmental Film Festival, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this conversation with Brian Skerry, a photojournalist and film producer specializing in marine, wildlife, and underwater environments. You just saw the first episode of a four-part series, Secrets of the Whales, which focused on orca whales in New Zealand, Norway, Antarctica, the Falkland Islands, and Patagonia. This series is the result of a 3-year assignment that went to 24 global locations covering 5 species and culminating in a 4-part series streaming on Disney Plus on Earth Day. It'll also be a feature in National Geographic's May Ocean issue and a companion book. This production is the winner of the Environmental Film Festival's Shared Earth Foundation Award for Advocacy that was established for the festival in 2014, and it recognizes a film that best inspires advocacy in response to a compelling environmental challenge. So a little bit about Brian before we continue. Since 1998, Brian has been a contributing photographer for National Geographic magazine. In 2014, he was named a National Geographic Society Fellow. And in 2017, he was named the Rolex National Geographic Explorer of the Year. He's an 11-time award winner in the prestigious Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition. He's also been recognized with awards from Pictures of the Year International, Nature's Best, Communications Arts, and he's the only photographer to win the coveted Peter Benchley Award for Excellence in Media. In 2010, National Geographic magazine named one of Brian's images among their 50 greatest photographs of all time. And in 2016, he was awarded the National Geographic Photographer's Photographer Award. This is an honor bestowed on him by his colleagues. Personally, I can attest that Brian is also an outstanding example of grace under pressure, and he is one of the nicest people that you will ever meet. So Brian, welcome. And you are with us today from where?
Well, thank you very much, Greg. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. I am home in my home studio on the coast of southern Maine in a little town called York, Maine. So I was actually out diving just a couple of days ago in my dry suit in the balmy 36-degree water temperature, but nice to be cleaned up and talking with you here right now.
Well, great. So Brian, this film was really quite wonderful. And I think one thing that was so noticeable throughout this episode, you talk about whales having their own cultures. So tell us about when and how you and people who study whales came to this conclusion.
Yeah, it's a great question, and particularly to sort of frame this discussion, Greg, so thanks for that. You know, the last big whale project that I did was a story I did for National Geographic in 2008 about the most endangered whale in the world, the North Atlantic right whale. And I compared and contrasted the North Atlantic species, this beleaguered whale, with their southern cousins, the southern right whale. And I spent a couple of years on that project and became very, deeply invested in whales. I had long been interested in them. I saw my first whale underwater back in 1985. I rescued a humpback whale in Cape Cod Bay, cut it out of a trawl net, but have long been interested. And since that time, since 2008, I was searching for a way to do a multi-species story. What was going to be the narrative? And I considered a number of different themes, but there was this reoccurring theme that I kept seeing in scientific papers and as I talked to researchers, attended conferences, and it was this notion of culture. The fact that within genetically identical species, whales are doing things differently, much the way that humans are. So, my friend, Dr. Shane Garrow, who helped me very much in terms of understanding the notion of whale culture, he sort of described it this way. He said, behavior is what we do. culture is how we do it. So humans, most humans eat food with utensils. Some use chopsticks, some use forks and knives. And that's the difference between behavior and culture. And as he described the whales that he was working with in the Eastern Caribbean, these sperm whales, and had discovered that they have unique dialects that, you know, they isolate based on, for lack of a better word, language. I began to extrapolate and look at other species and look where they might be doing things differently in different parts of the world culturally, these ancestral traditions. And that's how I sort of formed the basis for Secrets of the Whales. And, you know, it grew from there. It began as, you know, a magazine story, then the TV series, the book, and so forth. And but the whole notion was based on this idea of whale culture, as you described.
And how long does this behavior have to be going on before it is determined that it is a culture?
Yeah, that is also excellent question. You know, I don't know that there's a real defined answer to that. I think that, but you raise a good point. You know, what is something that just happens and you know, might be a current trend, but it may not really be culture. And one example of that, and we filmed this in the series, particularly with orca, where you see something like depredation going on, where now in some cases whales are finding it easier to feed by stealing fish from commercial fishing vessels. You know, sperm whales are doing this in Alaska. They're stealing sablefish, black cod off of long lines, or the orca in the Norwegian Arctic are hanging out near these commercial herring boats and getting the fish that are spilling out of the net. How much of that is just opportunistic and, you know, a trend? Or is it actually becoming culture? Are whales spreading the news? You know, are they saying to their friends, we have this really cool new takeout restaurant here. You don't have to waste a lot of energy going out and making your own dinner. You can just hang out here and get an easy meal. So I think, you know, it's probably measured by time. If it continues to go on for a long time and those animals are doing it in a given place, and other whales are doing something completely different in another place, that could be termed culture. I think researchers are a little bit torn on this, and what one researcher will call culture and what another one, you know, might say, well, it's not really that. But I think in general, we can certainly say that whales, you know, whales and dolphins, whales are all cetaceans, have, you know, this high degree of cognition, that they are doing things differently in different parts of the world that are like in the way that humans do, that can be in many cases defined as culture. They are not born with innate traits like humans, so they have to learn from their parents, in many cases from their moms. This is learned behavior. So the mothers are teaching their calves the behaviors that they will need to know, the things that they will need to know to survive. And in many cases, they're also teaching them these ancestral traditions, the things that are unique to their culture, depending where in the world they live. It might be how to catch certain prey, or how to sing a song, or, you know, all these different aspects of their lives that we are just beginning to really reveal.
And I think this first episode did a wonderful job of illustrating that, the different behavior in those different locations.
Yeah.
So, but Brian, in this series, you examine 5 different whale species: orcas, humpbacks, belugas, narwhals, and sperm whales. So how did you decide that you were going to begin with orcas?
Yeah, you know, I think quite honestly, they are all very compelling, and we could have begun the series with any of them and it would have worked. We were filming simultaneously each species. So I would go from the Canadian Arctic, where I was photographing belugas, and come back home and repack, and a day later I'd be in New Zealand, and then I'd be in the Cook Islands, New Zealand for orca, and then the Cook Islands for humpback. So we were going from one location to the next, working with all of these different species. And it was only after we sort of got through the editing process and had the final films that sort of an order emerged. I think in many ways we always thought we might lead with orca, They are certainly one of the more dynamic animals. I would say arguably the most intelligent animal in the ocean, scary, smart animals. I describe in my book, Secrets of the Whales, it being in the Norwegian Arctic and feeling like I was being scanned by a supercomputer. Most of the work that I did was all freediving, just breath holding and going down to shoot these sequences and get the photos. But in the Norwegian Arctic on one of those commercial fishing vessels, I did come back, put on a little scuba tank and go down, and you could see the animal's behavior change. When I was just free diving, I was sort of just, there in the background. They weren't paying me much attention. But once I got down there at about, I don't know, 30 feet or so and was hanging out, you could see them really scanning me and trying to figure out, and sort of almost I could feel warning me like, don't even think about eating that fish. That's my fish. So you know that they're super smart. They're capable of amazing things. And I just, I think we felt that leading with Orca was a great way to bring people into the notion of Secrets of the Whales and the notion of culture.
So I'm going to ask you this next question, which might be like asking you to select your favorite child.
Yeah, which might be easier, actually. Yeah.
So of all the species that you featured, is there one that you are particularly awed by or fascinated by?
Yeah, that is a very hard question, and my inclination is to pass on that. But let me say this. I've been in this business in some way for decades, and I get excited about everything in the ocean. And whatever I'm focused on at the moment, I can get really jazzed about. I was out, a couple of days ago photographing an endemic nudibranch here in the Gulf of Maine, this little 2-inch sea slug that shows up at this time of the year, and I just couldn't get enough of it. So I get very excited about whatever it is, whatever story I'm telling, but it really is, for me, about the story. And being in the presence of whales is quite unlike any other thing that I've ever done. It is on a completely different level, a different rarefied plane, if you will. When I'm with sperm whales, and this is an animal that as a little boy, I used to imagine I would go to the Whaling Museum in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and walk down the cobblestone streets that Herman Melville walked down, probably before he wrote Moby Dick, and see those historical instruments that they used for whaling, and think about how horrible that was. But my mind was fascinated with the notion that those animals were still out there. This wasn't like a dinosaur that once lived. There were sperm whales out in the ocean swimming out there today. So for me today, to be out there with this animal that had been portrayed as a monster, and to spend months, in the field waiting for those moments when they come together in a social group, and you see how tender they are, how gentle, how they're rubbing together and gently biting each other. And I describe it as reaffirming their family bonds. For an animal that lives in the deep ocean and the void of a three-dimensional fluid, ocean, where they touch nothing, the idea of coming together every so often and touching each other must be really special. To be present for that, to be allowed into their world, is off the scale. It's almost, indescribable. I can try to describe it, but there's still emotions that I can't really get at. To be up in the Arctic with beluga whales and narwhals, equally just mind-blowing. I was able to get images and footage that hadn't been done before. And of course, Orca, is off the scale too, because like I said, it's like a supercomputer. They're scary smart, but yet they have a level of respect, it seems. And the humpback whales, to be out in the South Pacific on an early morning and to go out on the boat and see the sun coming through the palm trees, it's like a storybook. You go into a little cove and you see a mom and baby, a 1 or 2 day old calf, and you slip in gently, and they tolerate you. The calf is curious. It might swim towards you, and you realize how special that is. So that's not an answer to your question, but it's a long-winded way of saying that it's very hard to pick one. And I think whatever I'm with at the moment, and particularly whales, is just each extraordinary.
That was a perfectly eloquent answer. So
A perfectly eloquent dodge is what it was. Yeah.
no. You're always excellent at telling a story. And so it's great to hear you tell the story in what could be a very pat answer. So two things I want to go back to. You talked about free diving. And is that something that is commonly done? How long did it take you to master that technique? And why do you feel the need to free dive?
Yeah, so in underwater filmmaking, photography, you have two or three choices really. You can use scuba, open circuit scuba, which is a scuba tank and it expels bubbles into the water column. You could use closed circuit, which is a rebreather, which gives you great time underwater. It scrubs the gas and purifies it and lets you stay under for hours. It's very silent, but it's still a big piece of apparatus that you wear. Or you can free dive, which is very pure. It's just a mask, snorkel, and fins, maybe a thin wetsuit, depending where you are in the world. With whales, scuba is not usually a great option because the bubbles tend to frighten the whales. These are animals that, bubbles mean things. Marine mammals often will use threat displays or blow bubbles in some sort of meaning. I think that plays into it, but it's just also noisy. The other thing is that even if whales appear to be moving relatively slowly through the water, if you've got a social group of sperm whales sort of just, rolling around in the water, for a human to keep up with them, it can be exhausting. And to have, a 50-pound scuba tank and a weight belt and a buoyancy compensator and all that gear will slow you down. So you've got this big clunky thing, you're blowing bubbles. It's not effective. It tends to not let the whales, or the whales don't let you get close when you're wearing that stuff. So I prefer, a rebreather could work, but it's also limiting because of the weight. So generally speaking, at least for me and the team we were working together on this, free diving seemed to be the best way. Now, it is limiting because you can only stay underwater as long as you can hold your breath. And that, might be 2 minutes, maybe 3 if you're really good at it. So what I do, and I've done this periodically throughout my career, is I train when I'm going to be doing a project that involves free diving. So living here on the coast of Maine, in the 3+ years that I was working on this project, I would be out whenever I was home diving, and I have various thickness of wetsuits. So I was free diving in the Arctic with a 10 millimeter special made suit that was built originally for Navy SEALs, two teams of the Navy SEALs. In tropical waters, it's a shorty, it's a very thin 1/8-inch wetsuit. But here in Maine, I would put that on and dive year round. So in the wintertime, water might be 36 degrees, and I'm out there free diving, even without a camera, just to stay in shape for that, so that when the moment comes, I can extend my range a little bit more. Yeah.
Okay. And so, Brian, you also talked about capturing some never before seen behaviors. And we saw examples of that, I believe, in this first episode. So what else can folks expect in future episodes?
Right. Well, I think it's always a little slippery slope to say you've captured stuff for the first time, because inevitably somebody will come out of the background and say, "Oh no, I got that." To the best of my knowledge, to the best of our knowledge, there are a number of firsts here in this series, and some of those include the work that I did with beluga whales in the Canadian Arctic. This is a place where belugas migrate to in the summertime. In the winter, they're in complete darkness. In the summer, they migrate through the Northwest Passage. They come to their summer playground, as I call it, where they move into this estuary ecosystem. The water is very shallow. There's a freshwater river flowing into that bay. The ocean temperature is about 29 degrees Fahrenheit, and the freshwater is maybe 3 or 4 degrees warmer. So it's a perfect place for them to have their calves, bring their newborn babies. But it's a very shallow place, and you might get hundreds of whales in there, and moms and babies. It's a group maternity ward. However, you're not allowed to go in the water there, but if you put as much as a toe in the water there, even if you were allowed, you would get a stampede of hundreds of whales leaving that bay and maybe not coming back. So we were able to design and build special remote cameras that after a lot of trial and error, I figured out how to place them, where to place them, how to do it, working with my partner up there, Nansen Weber. And we were able to figure out how to do this. And we got what we believe is the very first footage of these families of beluga whales coming into this, meter deep, like 3 feet, 4 feet deep water, rubbing on the gravel bottom like a giant loofah. It's a day at the spa for them. They're rubbing off their old skin. You see newborn calves. I mean, newborn little beluga nuggets, right out of the oven. I mean, still have the fetal folds on them, and it's extraordinary. I think we also we were able to capture the first scene of a sperm whale calf nursing in the Caribbean. I remember I was with Dr. Shane Garrow, who I was working with on this project, who really helped me at the beginning form the understanding and foundation for this project. And I showed him the photos and the footage, and he said, Brian, there's an old saying in the whale biology world that for years they used to say this. They said, someday we will know everything there is to know about whales except how a sperm whale calf nurses, because they couldn't figure out with that big jaw. They said how, they just couldn't see it. And we got frame by frame, and it's in the series, of that jaw, sliding into a mammary slit on mom and able to get the milk into its mouth. So we got that. I think that's a first. With the orca, we got this depredation near fishing boats. I know some of that had been photographed. I don't know that it's ever been in a series like this, a documentary series. We got a mom carrying its dead calf, with the orca in the Norwegian Arctic, also maybe a first. So I think there's a number of these elements in each episode, really, where you'll see some things that haven't been seen before.
So, Brian, clearly the orca whales, it's a matriarchal culture. Is that the case with the other whale species too?
Yeah, it's a great question, Greg. It is in some of the whale species, but not all of them. So orca and sperm whales are certainly matriarchal or matrilineal. Always, kind of confused as to which is the proper usage there. I tend to say matrilineal, but they are societies that are led by the older, wiser females of the family that make all the decisions. These sperm whales that the researchers have been studying in various locations, particularly off of Dominica in the Caribbean, these are definitely led by these older, wiser females. And, as you follow them over a period of time, you'll see them on the leeward side of the island. And they're not always there. I mean, they're not resident animals. They come and go, but they are somewhat predictable to find if you spend enough time. But, they'll cruise the coastline. And when they get to the end of the island, before they decide to either go out into the channel where it might be windy and rough and so forth, they'll stop. And the researchers, will say that they're having a little discussion. The females are saying, what should we do? Should we go out here? They're actually having this little discussion about where they should go next. And but those are decisions being made by these, the grandmothers and the mothers in those societies. Same with orca. Not so much humpbacks. It's humpbacks. It's a little bit different. It's moms and calves that tend to be more of a unit. There are sort of looser based families. The beluga whales. These are fusion fission sort of cultures where they're larger families and they come and go. You'll get males and females coming together and splitting apart, and calves and so forth. So it's often described as this fusion fission sort of dynamic with them, but they are families, and there's lots of great revelations coming out about them as well, that the babies are given names that are like the mother's name when they first get born, and then when they start to stop speaking gibberish and actually begin to speak beluga dialects, then they get their own name, like dolphins, a signature whistle. So really fascinating stuff, and I think we're only at the tip of the iceberg in terms of really truly understanding the complex societies here.
So Brian, as you're talking about this behavior, I am struck by the parallels between what Jane Goodall revealed to us in the behavior of chimpanzees, what a lot of elephant researchers are revealing. And, I guess, do you see these parallels as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I got a lovely quote from Jane Goodall for the back cover of my book, where she talks about how much these animals, whales, are like us, having reviewed my manuscript and looked at the book. And the reason I approached Jane was for that very reason, because not only am I a great fan and I was greatly inspired by her work all these years, but the fact that I think primates and whales are very similar in many regards. Obviously, they live in different realms, terrestrial versus ocean, but they do have these cultures, they do have these families. They are a lot like humans, not completely, but there's no question. And elephants the same. The researchers who've studied that. I mean, Katie Payne talking about these low frequency sounds and the cultures. I think that whales are very much like elephants in that regard. And it's long been my belief that animals have person of them have cultures. I'm working with whales right now, but I would argue that in the time ahead, so much more will be revealed. We know that that ravens or crows and birds have culture. I think so many animals probably do, and for me, this is the really exciting realm, the genre of filmmaking and science and storytelling that exists in the time ahead, where we'll be able to learn through science what's happening with these animals and how complex they are. And what's really exciting for me, and this is why I was so excited to sort of create Secrets of the Whales, was because once once audiences understand the notion of culture, once we see the natural world through the lens of culture, you can't unknow that. Once you understand that, you don't forget it. And I really believe that for me, it was a game changer. So much of my work in my career has evolved. In the beginning, I just wanted to do cool things, photograph and tell stories about animals that I was interested in. And then I saw so many problems occurring in the world's oceans that I really spent a lot of time doing environmental issues and conservation themes and problems and solutions. With Secrets of the Whales, it was not overtly about problems, but yet I felt it could have that benefit, that dividend, that it was about cutting edge science revealing these human-like traits in these charismatic ocean animals. But once we saw these families, we would care. It was storytelling for me on a different level. I was trying to get the attention of the audience through love, through falling in love with these animals and get them to care about the planet in maybe a slightly different way. So that's the exciting thing for me.
So, Brian, I think you jumped into my brain because you kind of answered that question that I was going to ask you. But I think, your answer, all of your work, the series, the book, and the magazine article kind of reflect the importance of science, exploration, education, and storytelling to help people preserve the wonder of the world, which is National Geographic's mission. And Brian, you are a wonderful reflection of that mission. And also, it's a mission that is shared by the DC Environmental Film Festival too. So I want to thank you, Brian, for taking us on your underwater world to learn more about whales. And anything you want to say, Brian?
Yeah, I thank you very much, Greg. That's very, very kind. And, I wish we had 2 hours to talk about this. And I just want to give credit to everybody else that worked on this, with me. I mean, Red Rock Films, who had a fantastic team, editors, producers, everybody that really dug in and knocked it out of the park. James Cameron as our executive producer, a fantastic pioneering ocean explorer and master storyteller, Sigourney Weaver, who, from the very beginning, I always thought, wouldn't it be great if we could get Sigourney to narrate this? I mean, she just has so much gravitas, particularly with these female societies and the whales and so forth. So it just came together in a wonderfully organic way. And I couldn't be more pleased with the entire team and how it all evolved and the end results here. So I'm grateful, I'm thankful. Thank you so much to the DC Environmental Film Festival. This is a real honor to be here and to be recognized. And Greg, always a pleasure chatting with you.
All right, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us. And just want to remind you, there are a lot of films to watch in the DC Environmental Film Festival. So watch them. Bye.